Hello and welcome to Energy Sphere Season 1. Energy Sphere is a brand new platform where energy professionals from Pakistan and around the world will be featured to discuss experiences, perspectives, and ideas. My name is Iraj Tariq.
And I'm Sarah Kazmi.
And I'm Asjadullah Qureshi. And we are your hosts. This season, through interviews and discussions amongst regulators, policymakers, industry leaders, and energy experts, the Energy Sphere podcast will explore development in key sectors of oil and gas, power, minerals, and energy intervention and emerging technologies. The show aims to help improve understanding of Pakistan's evolving energy landscape and the conditions that support economic engagement.
We would also like to thank the U.S. mission to Pakistan in partnership with the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network for their support in Season 1 of the Energy Sphere.
The views expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent the views of any institution or organization.
So stay with us, subscribe, and follow the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Energy Sphere. I'm Iraj and today we are taking a closer look at one of the most important parts of the energy industry, the power sector.
That's right. And today we're delighted to bring you our first guest conversation. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Shah Jahan Mirza, power sector professional with 38 years of experience. He also served as the managing director of Private Power Infrastructure Board. And in our interview, he goes on to explain the role of PPIB in a bit more detail from an investor perspective. He talked about reforms that took place during his tenure. We talked about challenges and, more importantly, opportunities that exist in Pakistan's power sector. But before we get to my conversation with Mr. Shah Jahan Mirza, I thought we could take advantage of having Ajad with us in the studio today. And given his experience in the power sector, why don't we spend a few minutes getting his perspective on some of the key issues? So if you've got any questions for him, let's start the episode with that.
So, before we dive into Shah Jahan Mirza Saab's interview, Asjad, I have a question from you that how would you describe the current state of Pakistan's power sector compared to like where it was a decade or two ago?
So, I would describe Pakistan's power sector as a system that has significantly evolved in what it used to be a couple of years ago. In fact, if you're saying that a decade ago, I would say 5 years ago, it was very different from what it is right now. But the challenges and opportunities have also evolved with the power sector. If we go back a couple of decades, the main concern was simply whether that enough electricity would be available or not. There were long duration of outages, electricity outages, brownouts, blackouts, and the country was dealing with the chronic shortages, load shedding, weak transmission infrastructure, limited capacity, and the news media would always be roaring about that we don't have capacity and there were no power plants set up, and the scenario was pretty different. About a decade ago, the focus shifted to adding generation quickly. That phase helped address the immediate energy deficit and brought substantial new capacity into the system. If we see the entire coal regime coming in, the RLNG regime coming in, and the third coal regime coming in, these are the three main areas. And nuclear, we have added substantial nuclear now in the Pakistan's power sector. So the we the focus was to move towards more rapid inclusion of generation. But today the debate has entirely changed. It is no longer about building more megawatts. In many ways, Pakistan has moved from an energy shortage challenge to an affordability, utilization, flexibility, and governance challenge, actually. So that rapid growth has solved some of the issues, but has introduced challenges and opportunities, I would say, of its own. We now have a much more diverse generation mix. Stronger transmission ambitions are better. Data is available, more mature policy discussion around competitive markets, renewable storage, and integrated planning. But this debate is not about adding more capacity in terms of generation. In many ways, Pakistan has moved from the energy shortage challenge to an affordability, utilization, and flexibility challenge. So we have a much more diverse generation mix. better data availability, more mature policy discussions, and something the new era of solar PVs, the rooftop solar, CTBCM, BESS. These are all the buzzwords now that may be very relevant for the next 5 to 10 years. And let's see what new challenges come after that.
Yeah, so I mean, speaking of new era, and as you said, like there's certain buzzwords that we hear, and CTBCM has been, I think, a major one. I think the introduction of a completely new regulatory regime, which happened through an amendment in the law in 2018, and since then it's been implemented in phases. How do you actually see the whole uh, CTBCM regime, and what's your comment on that?
So CTBCM is a very interesting and very important thing for power sector in Pakistan because this transition is something that we have been looking forward to. The unbundling roadmap of ABDA, and then in the 1997 when NEPRA came into being and the licenses were issued, this was the ultimate plan that go towards a competitive market. And at least this, with the C mod announced, this is the first step in the competitive market direction that has been concretely taken, and we are now in a sort of a phase where people can have their own generation and supply from any of their own selected suppliers. So this is a transitional phase, and the ultimate goal is to have this competition down to the retail level. But for the time being, at the wholesale level, at least, this competition has started, and we have a CTBCM model in place. I think we can do a separate episode on this entire CTBCM thing because it opens up avenues for a lot of collaboration and interest to the investors all around the world.
So I have a question on net metering. Like when we talk about the solar, so solar is often portrayed as either the hero or the problem. So from your perspective, is solar itself the challenge, or is it the way we are integrating it into the grid?
Uh, I think that's a very good question and a very good thing that we should like have a small discussion on. Actually, yes, you're right. Part of the answer is in the question that solar is neither the hero nor the villain in this case. I would say it has solved a lot of socioeconomic problems at household level, reducing the energy costs, and the thing like the households are now more independent and financially independent. They can make more decisions on that side. But as a great challenge, I think so it has created some problems that were unforeseen. And I wouldn't say that it was a problem, it was a fault at someone's end, but it was something that the entire world has faced right now. If you see some of the developing countries, some of the developing economies, and even the developed economies, they have to really go back and put a reverse gear on and just change their net metering policies. In terms of developing economies, Indonesia and Vietnam, these are the countries, Philippines even, they have to change their laws significantly. Bangladesh, as I think over my mind. So Bangladesh is, or these are the countries that have to change their own. And in terms of the developed economies, I think California has introduced a new net metering three now, NEM3. So like this solar problem has hit not only the developed economies but the developed economies as well. Now, coming back to the point that is it a challenge or is it an opportunity? I would say it is an opportunity more so because you see what the solar actually does. It solves your energy woes. The government does not have to invest into adding another power plant. Let's say yes, for the off solar hours, the demand will increase because what solar does is change consumer behavior, and people once they consider the energy to be free energy at the solar time. So what happens that afterwards that the behavior continues, and the what we have seen recently is that the demand is increasing, but during the off solar hours, not during the solar hours.
Yeah.
So which means that the consumer behavior is changing, the consumer load demand is changing. These things are changing. So that is where from a technical perspective, the problems come into being. So that is the exact area where some innovative solution is required to balance that grid fluctuation from the solar hours to the non-solar hours.
And what can be done in those areas is something that the world is also grappling with, but they are coming up with some R&D based solutions. There are areas where I would like to invite uh, other stakeholders to have more sessions on and have a more focus on. So we could have this a solution for this. One of the ready-made solution is BESS, the utility scale battery energy storage system. What happens that during those peak and the difference is curtailed between the peak and off-peak hours. And Australia is one of the biggest markets for BESS. ERCOT, which is the Texas zone, is the biggest market. They are integrating around 61% of their energy mixes from renewable via variable renewable energy, and they have a large share of solar and a large share of wind as well. But they are dealing with these fluctuations in a very efficient manner. So I think there is something very common in here where we can land some expertise and investment ultimately in the areas where we can solve our grid reliability and grid flexibility issues that have come up because of solar. So, summing it up, I think that solar is both a challenge, but once you look at with the right lens, it can become a huge investment opportunity in terms of the transmission side and grid flexibility side.
Yeah, that's really like valuable perspective, Asjad. So like it literally reminds us the solar is not the problem. It's actually the part of the solution. So also you mentioned about the like battery storage and like we can have a question on, or we can have a discussion on that as well, that like we have heard about like mini grids and battery energy storage and like local manufacturing. So, which of these, like, do you think has the greatest potential, particularly if we look into our country, like to transform Pakistan's energy future? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
I think Pakistan, being an agrarian country, has a lot of potential in biogas and biomass, which is unexplored and
That's
not
true.
formally explored, I would say, right now. And there are talks of some policy on biogas and biomass, so we have a separate policy for that. And if you would have been following this in the recent prosumer regulation revision, biomass and biogas has been added as a net metering source, which also has a potential to transform how our rural communities operate. Because you see, the availability of biomass, we do have a lot of biomass available with ourselves, but we do not have a structured way of using that. If that comes into the national grid, or let's say a micro or mini grid, so that would be very good for the our rural areas where or the backward areas where having the national grid, constructing the national grid is otherwise a big challenge. So those areas can see the social uplift, and that can come through electrification of those areas. And we do have the mini grid and microgrid regulations in place. So legally speaking, those areas that are far flung and cannot be connected to the national grid can be can be electrified using biomass or biogas, and having a BESS so that they can have a reliable source of supply around the day. And secondly, for those areas that are connected to the national grid but have an opportunity with managing their biomass in a much better manner, I think this would be a transformational thing since the net metering has been allowed to them. So it's a wonderful business opportunity at that level, and at the, I would say, SMB level and a household, the what you call it, cottage industry level. That if there is someone who is looking towards that, those community programs, those where those small communities who are not well to do can come up and have through net metering or behind the meter have their own generation installed, have a microgrid or a mini grid, and they can work on electrifying their communities. So things would follow over that. So I think it has a very it has a two-way benefit right now. It is an unexplored technology to some extent. It is still what is being worked on, microgrid and mini grid. It is costly, yes, but technology is evolving, so the price can come down very soon. And I think this is something that we need to talk more about in the policy discussions and other ways. That this biomass it has transformational thing. So coming back to your main question, that how can we shift towards these microgrids and BESS? So to power those microgrids, yes, solar is the number one thing. We can have solar if the land is available over there. But in fact, even if not solar, there are other options available like biomass, biogas, and even geothermal. Geothermal is a very unexplored and underexplored, I would say, technology right now, which I think needs to be looked more into because it has a wonderful potential, especially in space heating and space cooling terms. So these are all the areas that can power the micro and mini grid and make an impactful change for the Pakistani communities, especially the back off communities.
Yes, I think I definitely would want to learn more about geothermal. So maybe we just found a topic for a future episode. So that's great. I think this might be a good place to pause and, let's hear some of the ideas that Mr. Shah Jahan Mirza had about Pakistan's power sector and what are some of the areas that he sees as an opportunity. So let's take a listen to what he had to say. Sir, welcome and thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to have you on. Since this is a brand new podcast, I do want to give you some context to the platform. The podcast is inspired from the IVLP, which is the professional exchange program in the United States that I was a part of last year, along with fellow energy experts from Pakistan. So during a 3-week trip in several of the states, we had the opportunity to meet with energy experts and exchange ideas. And upon returning, we wanted to continue those conversations. So it is through this podcast that we're essentially creating a platform for energy professionals, not just in Pakistan, but around the world. So that means our audience is intended to be global. And for season 1, we wanted to start things off with the power sector. And so we thought no one better than you with your nearly 4 decades of experience to have on. So thank you again for taking the time out and speaking with me. So, sir, I thought we could start with you giving an introduction about yourself to our listeners and tell the audience about your career, including your most recent role.
Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Shah Jahan Mirza, and I have worked as Managing Director of Private Power and Infrastructure Board, generally known as PPIB, for over 11 years. This organization basically is a one-window facility for the investors who want to make investment in the power sector of Pakistan, whether it is a generation, it's transmission, or it's some other area. So this PPIB works as a one-window facility on behalf of Government of Pakistan. So we have a very powerful board, which was previously headed by the Minister for Power. Now it is headed by the Secretary Power. So the idea is to provide one-stop facilitation to the investors, to the private sector investors. Board is actually, board comprises of the various high level like Secretary Finance, Secretary Planning, Secretary Petroleum, Chairman FBR, the chief secretaries of the 4 provinces, Gilgit-Baltistan, Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, they're all members. So it is a very high power board. The idea is to make the decision right then and there, rather than moving the documents and the files from one department to another department. And we have been quite successful. PPIB has been quite successful. It was set up in 1994, and till now we have, through PPIB, private sector has added 25,000 megawatt of power generation into the grid, which is actually more than 60% of the current power generation capacity of Pakistan. So this is our key role. Apart from that, we have done one first transmission line in the private sector in Pakistan also. So that is the key role of PPIB.
Okay. So I do remember there used to be, I know that it's recently merged, but there was AEDB as well, Alternative Energy Development Board, and now I think it's merged into PPIB. So actually, what was the thought process of having these two, the two separation?
I think that the idea was actually to keep more focus on the renewable energy. So at that time, when I think it was set up in, if I'm not mistaken, 2006, ADB was Alternate Energy Development Board was set up in 2006. But unfortunately, I think this is not me only. People feel that probably the AEDB was not really quite active and was not able to deliver in terms of renewable energy projects in Pakistan. So this was the idea. I think this was floating for last many years, even in 2017, because both are statutory bodies, so any amendment required the approval of the parliament. So even in 2017, the bill went to the National Assembly and to the Senate House, but it could not be passed because at that time the Senate tenure was ending. So the idea was to bring in more efficiency because two organizations were doing the same work. They were working as a one-window facilitator. The only difference was PPIB was doing the hydro, the thermal projects, and AEDB was doing the renewable energy projects. So I think this was the idea not from the government side, but also from multilaterals and USAID, that rather than creating two organizations doing the same work, it will be better and it will create synergy if one organization provides this facilitation. And as I said earlier, the PPIB has been quite successful in delivering whatever mandate it has. So government decided to merge it in June 2023. The process was completed and AEDB was merged into PPIB.
Okay. And I'm also curious to understand how does PPIB coordinate with other regulators like NEPRA, especially in the context of facilitating investors? How do you coordinate with those?
PPIB actually has a lead role. You can say it's a key player when it comes to the investment by the private sector into the power sector. So any investor, if they want to set up some power project, make some investment, the first stop is PPIB. Because we work as on behalf of all the government agencies, so whatever they need to know, that is PPIB. That is PPIB. So we actually give the initial approval of the projects. We receive the application. We give the initial approvals. We issue what we call in the first step approval is the letter of interest, and then they go to NEPRA. Even before going to NEPRA, they need PPIB approval and PPIB LOI for going to NEPRA. The reason being is that PPIB coordinates with the other stakeholder. If an application comes to PPIB, we check with the power purchaser whether they need this power and under this technology, this scheme, and expected this is when the commercial operation will be achieved. Similarly, we check with the NTDC, now it's NGC, National Grid Company, whether they will be able to evacuate this power in their system according to that. So they do their own studies. So the first step is PPIB. We get coordination with the key stakeholders, and then they go to NEPRA for their tariff approval. So that is the process. And even after the tariff approval, we issue a letter of support under which they commit that they will achieve financial closing within a certain deadline. And after that, PPIB again sign an implementation agreement with the sponsor or investors. This implementation agreement is like in some locations they call them concession agreement. So this implementation agreement is signed by PPIB. Then the government guarantee, which is a backing up to the power purchaser liabilities for payment to these IPPs and the investors, that is also issued by PPIB. So PPIB stays in as a central player or central supporter. Rather, I say we work as a partner with these private investors wherever they have problem. Until financial closing, and even after that, for the commercial operation, they need a lot of approval, licenses, consents from various federal government, provincial government, even local government departments, like land acquisition, like environmental approvals, customs, FBR, State Bank. So everywhere, PPIB works with them and help them to get those approval and support them. And this support continues even after the COD, because there are some approvals which require renewals periodically. And then there are some issues sometimes with the customs clearance, with the remittances, with the State Bank of Pakistan. So we work with them hand in hand as a partner.
Okay. So that means they don't necessarily have to go to these various places themselves, or they'll at least ask PPIB to.
Yeah, they have to go at certain places because, of course, you know there are rules and regulations which require them to go and sign something or do something. But we support them wherever they have some problems, some delays. We support them to get it done quickly. That's our role.
So let's say there's like a US energy company, and they're just interested in exploring opportunities. Would they also get in touch at a very preliminary stage, or is it when they actually have like an idea or a project? Or do you like often get requests at a very early stage just for like questions and queries?
Generally, the first stop is PPIB, and even what happens sometime at a very high level, they approach the Prime Minister office, they approach our Minister office, they approach various other high level offices. So they refer them to PPIB, that you go to PPIB. We respond to them, we meet them, either we respond them through email or whatever sources. So that is, I think, the PPIB is the main respondent in that case, even if they don't come to PPIB. But generally, they come to PPIB that what are the investment opportunities, what is the available where they can make an investment, and if they have their own idea, they send proposal to PPIB that this is what we want to do. Let's say we set up a solar power plant, we are interested to set up a wind power plant. How should we proceed? For what is the basically next step?
Okay, got it. So, I mean, you mentioned that you were at PPIB for about 11 years. So during your tenure, what would you say were the most significant reforms or changes that you think improved investor confidence? Because we're, again, speaking from the perspective of potential investors in the power sector. What reforms or changes?
Yeah, when I actually took an additional charge as MD in 2014, there was 2002 policy in field. There was another policy in field. So what we did, we tried to make it very transparent and open policy, which is called the 2015 policy for private power in the nation. So we made that policy. That was the first step, and this was approved in Pakistan as it's a federation. So it is there is a body called Council of Common Interest where 4 provinces and federal government is represented. So any high-level policy and high-level decision about the energy sector is made by this forum. So we got this policy, 2015 power policy, approved from the CCI. So that is the highest forum. So that was the first step which gave the clarity, because previously the 2002 policy was there, but there were a lot of amendments, changes during the course. So there was no clarity that what is actually the final version. So we approved the 2015 power policy initially from the Council of Common Interest. Then we actually bring more transparency to the process. So even if you happen to visit the PPIB website, I think PPIB success and Pakistan's success in this respect is that we have always remained transparent, and we gave all the policies, the documents upfront. So our standard power purchase agreement, standard implementation agreements, government guarantee format, lenders direct agreement. So all these formats are available on our website. So any investors who actually is interested to look into the Pakistan market for investment, they actually don't need to come to PPIB. They can look at the website and they can have a fairly good idea that what kind of investment opportunity will be there, what kind of protections they have, what are the legal requirement, even the process flow chart, that what they need to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, what are the steps they need to do. So everything we brought into the PPIB website. So that gave a lot of confidence to the investors that whatever is being said, that is available, and they can upfront evaluate that where they are actually heading. So that is, I think, the main thing which we were able to achieve. Then, in order to, you may remember, I think the people who are not familiar with the Pakistan, in 2012, 13, 2011 to 13, we were having very severe load shedding in Pakistan, but we called blackouts or load shedding and power curtailment. So even in Islamabad, which is the capital, there was 1 hour electricity supply and 1 hour off. So we were having in Islamabad 12-hour supply. high. So at that time, government decided that rather than putting the investors into the rigmarole of NEPRA, regulatory approval of tariffs and everything, the NEPRA regulator announced the upfront tariff, which was for the coal project, which was for the hydro projects, which was for the local imported coal, gas. So they gave all these upfront tariffs so that investors know they don't have to go to NEPRA in the long hearing processes. So if the tariff are acceptable, they can evaluate the financials and their own technologies. And if they are interested, they can apply to that. They can come to PPIB. PPIB will evaluate, as I said earlier, in terms of the demand supply position and in terms of the evacuation with the relevant GOP entities. And then they can straight go to NEPRA that this is the proposal. PPIB has given us the LOI, so no prove the tariff. And as per regulation, the NEPRA just had 10 days actually to prove that tariff. So that was the kind of transparency and mechanism we brought into the process. And Alhamdulillah, during my tenure in a period of 10, 11 years, we were able to add more than 15,000 megawatt into the national grid and investment of around 20 billion USD, 33 IPPs. So that's I think
that's brilliant. Quite an accomplishment, I would say.
Yeah. That's I think that's a contribution by during my tenure by PPIB. But of course, it's a team effort. It's not one man effort. But again, I think this was a great achievement, not for PPIB but for the country as well, that we were able to eliminate this load shedding very, 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 very quickly. And in this, I think the role of CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is very important, because at that time, Pakistan economic condition, Pakistan credit rating was not really very good. So the main investment came from China. They supported Pakistan in terms of eliminating this load shedding.
Got it. And so what would you say are some of the current priority areas for new projects? As in, is it hydropower? Is it LNG? Is it grid modernization?
I think for new projects, what we hear in the press and everything, we can cover it later. But I think new project, if we generally look at what we call the Indicated Generation Capacity Expansion Plan, or now it is called the Integrated System Plan, which has been submitted to NEPRA in draft form end of last year, which is being updated also now. The main focus is on the hydro. We have one nuclear power plant, mostly hydro, wind, and solar. So that is what addition in the next 10 years is going to be made. And I think this is a great achievement that in the next 10 years, we don't have any thermal power plant into the generation planning. It's only one nuclear power plant. Otherwise, it's all hydro, wind, and solar, which is actually being added to the grid. So that is one area where investment can come in. But mostly these projects are committed, what we call committed projects. So already the sponsor investors are lined up. Some of them rather largely hydro is from the public sector. Like we have 4,500 megawatt the Amir Basha Dam, Moment Dam, Dasu Dam, which are already under construction, one nuclear plant. And the positive thing is that we have over 8,000 megawatt in the plan for the solar, but this government is still thinking that this should come from the consumer, rather than making the long-term agreement and making a single buyer model further operative. This should come from the consumers. And for that, I think this is the great start where we have just opened the CTBCM within competitive trading bilateral market, which is wholesale market. So mainly the quantum will now come from the wholesale market rather than continuing with the previous single buyer arrangement and long-term contract. Second area, I think, which is even more critical than the generation, that is our grid, which is not a very, I would say, digitized and updated grid. So we need to make a lot of investment in terms of making the grid digitized and robust, because main hindrance in our renewable energy induction is the weak grid. So we don't have automated and digitized grid. The reason is that even today we are curtailing some of the renewable energy wind power projects in the interior Sindh area because grid does not have the capacity. So that is where major investment will come up, and this 10-year generation expansion plan has actually targeted to increase the renewable energy to 62%. Currently, it is 32%, so we want to go to 62%. And for that, the major investment will come into the grid. So that is another area. Then government is also looking at modernizing the distribution system. We have very old distribution system. The old meters, which the meter readers go every month and they take the reading. So there are some malpractices in that. So government is working very seriously on the smart metering system. So already it has been started through public funds and the multilaterals in some of the areas, but now government is planning through PPIB actually to conduct the competitive bidding process for the distribution companies, about 16-17 million smart meters to be set up by the private sector, and the model is still under workout, but that will be sort of either revenue sharing or a monthly fee. So that will come from the private sector. Investment will be made in the private sector, and this will be on the BOT basis. Even in the transmission line, there are some transmission lines which are being proposed for the private sector. It will be finalized when this integrated system plan is approved by NEPRA. So that is, I think, the key area where investment is required. And another, I think, even more important area, because currently, as I said, we have, I think, fortunately, we have a huge influx of solar in Pakistan, which is a great achievement. In last 5-6 years, about 53 gigawatt of solar panels have been imported in Pakistan. And as per estimate, which is not 100% accurate, but as per estimate, about 30 gigawatt of these solar panels have been installed in Pakistan. Now, government has amended and changed the net metering regulation. They have moved from net metering to net billing for rooftop solar. So that has actually put a lot of interest and incentive for the consumers to go for the battery energy storage, because selling to the grid is no more profitable now. Previously, it was very, very profitable. You are in for a new project, you are actually generating at a price of 10-11 rupees, and you are selling to the grid for 24-25 rupees. So it was very, very profitable business. But now government has reduced it to like 9-10 rupees at power purchase price average. So that is no more very attractive business. So people are moving more and more towards the battery energy storage. I think that's the area where, like solar panel, I said 53 gigawatt, people are moving, and that is the area where investment will come. And the government is also working on a policy actually to address to attract the battery manufacturing, battery assembling into Pakistan. Hopefully, in the next budget, we'll be having some incentive for the battery energy storage. Apart from individual consumers, I think the commercial sector, the industries, they all have interest in the battery energy storage now. And even our next 10-year generation pension plan has about, if I'm not mistaken, about 7,000-8,000 megawatt of battery energy storage, which is a grid connected. Because currently the energy which we are curtailing, that could be stored, and actually that could be utilized in the peak times. So Pakistan is facing actually to some extent the technical issues, because this solar influx, on the one side it is very positive from the climate and clean energy and reducing the cost of generation, but at the same time it has put a challenge to the national grid, because our sale from the national grid have decreased around 10-11% in the last 3 years. And in the daytime, when the demand is low, all these solar panels are generating energy. So that sometimes that creates the technical issues within the grids about the grid management, particularly in the long weekends and holidays when all these solar panels are generating, and the demand is very, very low because everything is industry, commercial, everything is closed. So that is, I think, area which requires the battery energy storage induction at a grid level also, and also at the consumer end level. Maybe in the next 1 or 2 years, or maybe very soon, we see some regulation that anybody who's putting up a solar system at home or in industry, and they want to connect to the grid, they need to have a certain quantity, certain quantum of battery energy storage with that, because this is creating some trouble in the frequency and in the voltage level in the grid when they are all generating. And unfortunately, the system operators don't have any control on these small inverters. They are just generating and supplying to the grid. So I think these are the key areas. If I sum up, that's the grid, grid modernization, grid expansion, then smart metering at a distribution level, then battery energy storage is very critical. So I think these are the 3-4 key areas. And then of course the market, selling into the wholesale market, so people can set up their own maybe currently it seems that probably renewable energy is the best fit for selling into the market, because that is fortunately very low in terms of cost and tariff.
Okay. So I do want to pivot towards talking about research and development a little bit. So as I was telling you, when we went on the IVLP sort of energy trip, we had a chance to meet with like Department of Energy and these government departments. So one thing that I observed was that research and development is embedded within their core legal framework. So for example, they have this act called the Department of Energy Organization Act. I think it's an act of the 70s. And this act created what's the equivalent of NEPRA. It's called FERC. It also established the Department of Energy, but it gave that Department of Energy like a statutory mandate for research and development within the energy space. Now, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, I couldn't find that kind of sort of equivalence in Pakistan. Like if we look at some of our legislation, whether it's NEPRA as a statutory body or even PPIB or anything within, let's say, the ministry power division, I don't really see anything on research and development embedded within like our legal framework, right? To give it that strength. Do you think that there's sort of space for that, or do you think that Pakistan always operates differently? So, we don't necessarily need the backing of legislation in order to connect research and development within the energy space. What's your view on that?
I think U.S. did a very, very good step actually in terms of making this legislation, and this is, in my opinion, one of the most needed steps in the Pakistan sector. Because if I go back a little bit, we see in Pakistan that we have been moving in cycles. That in the 80s, government falls short of funds and government decided to induct the power sector. In 1985, the first decision was made and there was some parameters were given. After that, at that time, even there were severe shortages. So 1994 policy came. 1994 policy, we did about 3,000 megawatt of our power plants and under the upfront tariff. Then again, we ran into the surplus position. And in late 90s, early 2000, we were trying to sell this surplus electricity to India. But again, it comes 2005 and 6, we were again the shortage. So we have been moving in cycles that once we have the shortage, we run and we try to do whatever could be done in the shortest possible time. And then again, when we do that, there's no research and planning that what is our real demand, where our real demand will be. So I think that's very, very important that we set up some dedicated research institute for that. Maybe it's maybe it's NEPRA, the regulator, or a new body, or the planning division. But again, I think this is very, very critical because we as I said, we have been moving in cycle, and the main reason is that we don't have any dedicated body which can actually focus on the demand forecasting, on the research. No, one step has been taken, at least the ISMO, which is a newly created entity, Independent System and Market Operator. So they are preparing 10-year generation expansion and transmission system expansion plan. But I think we need to this research not only in the power sector, but as an integrated energy plan. That is very, very critical. And for that, research and development is needed, which I think we lack very, very badly. And that's why we have been coming into in these cycles of shortages and surpluses and not matching the demand with the supply. And sometimes supply is surplus, sometimes we are short of the supply. So this step is very much needed.
Because, I mean, we do have like research think tanks, obviously. But again, it's not like, it's something, they don't really have a statutory mandate necessarily. And they don't have that kind of, there's no connection, I think, necessarily. So I think that's also
Yeah, that's you very rightly said, because the research which is being done by the universities, by the donors, by the other organization, that is done on their own. So there is no government ownership. The institution or the bodies which are actually the decision maker, they don't have ownership of this research. So this research is a very good research, but they don't actually get together, and there's not combined results. So nobody take the ownership of that.
Yes.
So I think that's very critical. If it's legislation or this is legally mandatory, then this will be easier to move it forward and take a cohesive decision and cohesive analysis.
Okay, so since we are, touching upon US, just from your experience in the power sector, have you seen any cooperation between US and Pakistan, whether it's in the form of technical assistance or any partnerships within the power sector that you thought, okay, this was good, or any cooperation that's really taken?
Yes, I think that U.S. Energy cooperation has been very, very positive. If I tell you about myself, I was part of this energy cooperation in early '91. When I joined USAID for when this first strategic plan for private sector privatization was being made. This was called, I think, the strategic plan for privatization of power sector in Pakistan, which was released and finalized in 1992. So the main ownership in this was the two organizations, the World Bank and the USAID. So I was working with the consultants of USAID. So since then, I know that USAID and USA has been cooperating in terms of development of energy sector in Pakistan. And this is, I think, the process of reforms and restructuring and privatization of the power sector, which where USAID started in '91. They must be doing before that, but since I was part of that, so I'm mentioning that. And even after that, US through USAID, through State Energy Department, there have been many initiatives which have been taken together. I think if I recollect, probably recent one, probably the 2000, starting from 2000, maybe 8-10 years, that was the energy security, energy reforms, how to induct the clean energy into the grid. So that was the area on which this institutions were cooperating and focusing, mainly through USAID and its consultant. And then I think the next phase goes where USAID and the US State Department was pushing that facilitation of the private sector investment into the Pakistan, that how the private sector from the two countries can cooperate into that. And then this Pakistan Green Energy Alliance Agreement, I think it was done in 2025, last year. So this has been continuous support in this area. They have worked, they have supported in terms of grid management studies. They have supported in the energy efficiency, many initiatives in terms of energy efficiency to NECA, which is National Energy Efficiency Conservation Authority. So that is the area where they're working. The grid system improvement. The recent study which they were doing, that was the battery energy storage. I am not sure it was completed or not, but USAID was actually supporting the battery energy storage in the grid study. So there has been consistent cooperation and support from the US government in terms of improving the energy sector.
Do you think the emphasis changes or shifts depending on which administration is in power, or do you think that just the continuity went on?
I think this is a very difficult question, but I think the continuity is there, but probably with the
Types of,
political changes in the US and in the Pakistan, and particularly the problem and the issue rising in Pakistan, the emphasis have been changing, but continuity is there. As I said earlier, that there was phases where we were focusing on the energy security and energy reform, then private sector facilitation, then the Green Alliance. So these days, whatever is being done, the main focus stays on the green energy, more and more green energy into the grid. So there's a continuity, but again, the focuses and areas have been changing.
Sometimes it is, that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So just a couple of closing questions now. So if you are, let's say, speaking directly to an investor that's trying to evaluate Pakistan's energy market. Is there anything that you would want them to understand that may not be there in the headlines or in the news? Any thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question because as we know, the media actually covers what is going on. So they just look at the current issues and they like to highlight the issues and the problems. So I think that is media everywhere. As one of my colleague from US, he's a lawyer by profession. He says that if a newspaper says that a 777 plane has landed safely, there is no news. But if there's a problem with the landing, so that is the news for the media. So that's the way they project. So they are generally what we read in the media that is more negative or more sort of feeling that there's probably power sector has a lot of problem. There's no opportunity for investment. So we hear that there's a surplus capacity in Pakistan. We hear that there's a circular debt issue. We hear that there's no reliability in the power sector. But I think in all these issues, there are a lot of opportunities. In these challenges, there are a lot of opportunities. As I said earlier, this brings up that in Pakistan, we have probably one of the lowest per capita consumption of electricity. Is less than 600 kilowatt. Even the neighboring India, they are around 12 to 1300 kilowatt hour units per capita. We have less than 600. So that is opportunity which tells that we need to do a lot actually to bring more electricity to the people. And officially, about 95% of population in Pakistan has electricity access, but that does not mean they have reliable 24-hour electricity. There are areas they have electricity access, but electricity supply is only 2 hours a day. So that is the kind of so that is the area where we need to work. There are remote areas where grid taking the national grid or the distribution system is not feasible. So the mini grid and micro grid is opportunities on maybe on a cooperative level or on these issues. Then the grid expansion, as we said earlier, grid modernization, these are the opportunities. Battery energy storage is the opportunities which they can look at. The competitive trading market is another opportunities in which they can look at. And I would like to highlight that in Pakistan started this journey, and Pakistan one of the leader in the region in terms of bringing in IPPs and private investment in the power sector. So since then, it's more than 30 years. So Pakistan has developed very robust contractual structure, which is acceptable to the international banks. So name any big bank, whether it is a commercial bank, it's a multilateral, it's Exim Bank. So they have financed projects in Pakistan. So that is, I think, a lot of history and a lot of confidence which comes to the investor that a country which has not defaulted in 30, 40 years and our 60% generation is in the private sector. So they need to look into the Pakistan power sector seriously toward these opportunities rather than looking more at the media news, which generally highlight the issues and the problems and the challenges. So the bottom line is that there are challenges, no doubt in that, but that challenge is bringing a lot of good opportunities for investment also. So that is I think these are the areas where a U.S. investor can look at. And with the U.S. technology and U.S. advancement in the technology, I think that will be a lot of help to the Pakistan power sector, because we need to improve our grid and our distribution system and our planning also. As I said earlier, our planning and research is one of the weakest area in our power sector, in the energy sector. And that's why we land into the troubles all the time. So these are, I think,
there's a real potential for true collaboration, I think.
Yes, this is a real potential for collaboration.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, sir, just that's my parting sort of question. Just for anyone listening that perhaps wants to, reach out to you. I mean, you have these decades of knowledge in the sector. I know that you're not at PPIB anymore, but still, for whether it's a company or anyone really that wants to sort of pick your brain and reach out to you, are you available? Can we share your contact details? Or if you don't want people to reach out to you, that's perfectly fine as well. But I know that you are you were very active on LinkedIn at one point as well, and you're very approachable. I know that, but I thought anything you want to sort of tell the listeners if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, it will be play. I mean, having such a long association with the power sector, as I told you, I started within the power sector in early '91. So it will always be players. So whatever support, whatever information I can provide to any investor, so that's actually my passion. Staying so long with the private sector and working within the private sector. So you can share my LinkedIn contact, my email on your
We'll add it in the description.
Yeah, you can add in the description my LinkedIn contact and my email. So it will be play to provide any support, help, information if anybody requires in that. So regarding the power sector in Pakistan.
Perfect. So, sir, I'm going to thank you again for being here. It was a real pleasure. I learned a lot as well. I think it was, especially a lot of stuff from like back in the 90s and early 2000s. I think it was a great, sort of a history lesson as well. So thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very nice session. So reminding me some of the things which I have been doing and where I was, I take pride in that I was part of in the has humble contributions in this sector for a very, very long time. So thank you very much for inviting me, and it was a very, very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
As we wrap up, what becomes clear is Pakistan power sector is at a turning point. The challenges are real, but so are the opportunities. The next phase will depend on how effectively we can shift from simply adding capacity to building a smarter, more flexible, and more efficient power sector. With this, we'll conclude this episode. Hoping to see you for next time. Thank you for listening to us and subscribe for latest updates on what's happening in Pakistan's energy sector.